Okay, so this video is going to be covering the basics of massing. We're going to do just a couple different masses and show you just how kind of Revit handles masses and how to manipulate them and some of the different tools to create them. So to get started, we're going to go hit the Revit button, New Project. We're going to use the architectural template and let this load a sample project for us to work in. Okay, so massing is under the massing tab. You'll see here massing in site. Really, it kind of splits. To the left of where my mouse is all the massing tools. To the right of where my mouse is are all the site tools. What we're going to use right here is the in-place mass, this button right here. So we're going to go ahead and click that. You'll get a little pop-up that this is basically saying that in visibility graphics overrides, massing is turned off in this view. What it's doing is it's going to temporarily turn on massing. If you want for renderings or certain views to make sure that massing is going to be visible in those views, you'll probably have to turn that on in visibility graphics overrides. So right here we can create multiple masses. They all have to have unique names. So for our purposes, we're just going to have, mass 1 and hit OK. If we create multiple masses, obviously we can name those differently. Or you can have, keep massing in this view and have them all just be one mass. So to just start us off, we're going to create just a rectangle over here. Well, first let me say, when we were in Family Editor, you saw we would get to the kind of this sketch view, and you would see extrusion, sweep blend, revolve. All of those tools you can still make in a massing view, but obviously massing has to be a lot more flexible, a lot more editable than something that's very kind of strict like the modeling tools for the Family Editor. So you'll notice there's no extrusion, there's no sweep, there's no tools to tell Revit to create those forms. The way that you draw your lines and tell it to create forms, that's what it's going to, Revit's going to try to guess really what you're trying to tell it to do. So we're going to do all of those things. We're going to do just a simple extrusion first. Sorry about that. We're going to do a simple extrusion first, then we're going to do a sweep, then we're going to do a sweep blend, an extrusion blend. We're going to create then just a simple plane and a simple mesh, just to kind of show you how you create those forms. So to start off, we'll just select a rectangle, and we're going to do just a simple profile here. Let's go ahead and open up 3D as well. WT is window tile to get both of these windows next to each other. Especially when you're doing massing, it's really important to work into windows just to make sure that you are working in the right work plane. When you're doing massing, it's also, I'm going to say this at the beginning, and I'm sure I'll say it kind of throughout the video, it's really important to know where you're drawing in space, to set work planes, to make sure you're working in the correct work plane for your drawings, especially when you're doing sweeps and sweep blends. You'll see that it'll become apparent that it's just really important to know where you are in space. So we created this sketch on the level 1 work plane. We see here in 3D. So say we just wanted to make a simple extrusion of this. We have these 4 lines. They're all connected. So if we select them, you'll notice our ribbon changes and we have create form. Now you can create a solid form or a void form. If you just click this button, it's going to create a solid form. So now Revit saw our 4 lines, and they're all connected. It sees like a profile essentially, and it knows that you want to extrude it. So it just assumes that's what you want to do with it. Based on the size of our profile, of our rectangle, it just gave it a default of 6 feet. This obviously can be changed. It can be bumped up. But Revit, you also notice that it's given us an additional tool right here with 3 arrows, a green and a red and a blue arrow. So this is basically a massing manipulator tool. You'll see it a lot when you're working with massing. So basically how it works are these, whenever you mouse over some of these options here, it highlights it and it allows you to drag whatever you've selected based on that axis. So the green and the red being like the XY axis, and then the blue axis typically always represents the Z axis. So you can see if we grab one of these arrows, we're going to start moving this surface that we have selected in that axis. You'll also notice the little right angle symbol. Basically, if we mouse over that and then drag it, click and hold to drag, you can drag that surface or whatever you have selected within the two axes that it's kind of connecting there. So you'll see it's between our X and a Y. So if we drag this, we're going to be dragging it around our X and Y. That won't move in the Z direction. It's only going to move in the X and Y direction. So we can also, pull this in our Z direction. And then you notice it's not moving in our X and Y. And then we can also, move it in our that red axis, whether it be X or Y, and our Z axis by that kind of right angle manipulator there. So we can manipulate this surface. We can also grab an edge and pull it in. We can also grab points and manipulate those. So you notice with massing, as I start grabbing these points on this extrusion, I'm essentially just massaging or molding this extrusion to get it to act and work the way that I want it to get the form I want. But you'll notice as I start moving this thing, the faces, these surfaces, are really becoming molded and meshed. They're not breaking, or you create these staggered lines like you would if we were editing the face of a flat floor. Whenever you add a point and you start pulling it, it won't cone. It'll just start breaking it to flat surfaces, multiple flat surfaces, in order to get that shape. This, you actually get the nice curved meshed surface. So it's best to think of massing as manipulating something in clay or something like that. However best you want to think about it. So okay, that's just an extrusion that then we've kind of messed with a little bit. Say that we want to cut a hole through it or use void forms like we would in our family editor, we can do that. Let's just create another rectangle along level 1. That's fine. So you'll see it here in our 3D view, and we're going to create a form, and it's just going to be a void form, and we're going to push it through. So there you see the solid and the voids work the same way that they do in the family editor, but then they're editable just the same way. The void form, you can edit it the same way, grab it by its faces, its surfaces or its edges or its points, corners, that sort of thing. All right, so that's just simple massing with an extrusion. I'll show you a sweep now, how you kind of do a sweep in this mode. So we'll just create a line here. Doesn't have to be anything fancy. Alright, so I have a line on level 1. It has a little bit of a gentle curve to it. Alright, so this line can be either a profile or we can have it be the path. It's all about how you draw it and then how you tell it to create the form. So say I want that to be a path. I need to create a profile that's perpendicular to the path. Select both of them in the creative form in order to create that sweep. So let's just do a simple circle perpendicular to this line. on like a start, like on either the end or the beginning, and then we'll create that sweep. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to use a tool that we haven't really used much up to this point, but you use a lot in massing, so it's really important to know how it works. And it is the point element. I tend to call this like a reference point, or there's a couple different names for it, but essentially it works the same way no matter how you really use it. It essentially just creates, and there's no model element to it. It's just a point in space. So it has no geometry. It has no volume to it. It's just a point in space, just a coordinate. But it allows you to snap to it with lines and actually manipulate it. Through manipulating that point, you can manipulate all the things that are attached to it. So it's a really powerful tool. The other thing that it does is that if I place something out here in space, you can see that it creates reference planes in the X, Y, and Z coordinates off of this point, which is really great because then you can model based off of those reference planes that it creates. The also really helpful thing with a reference point is that if you place it on a line, it will place itself within that line. It'll attach itself to that line and create reference planes that are perpendicular and within the same plane as that line. So you'll notice I just placed this line on this curve, just anywhere on the curve, and it created a reference plane that's perpendicular to that line. So now that we place that point, we can create a profile on that reference plane that it created, and it's going to be perpendicular to that line. We can be guaranteed of that. So that's a really useful tool. We can, let's say, put another point on the ends, right? And we can model off of those points as well. So just for sake of our example, I'm going to go ahead and just put a circle on the reference plane that was created by that point. So I'm going to do circle. And what I want to be sure to do is set my reference plane. If I just start drawing right here, I'm going to be, working in something random. I'm not really sure, so I need to be sure that I specify what reference plane I want to start drawing in. You can do that two ways. Placement plane right here, you can go to pick, and you can pick it. Or you can use this little button right here, set work plane, and pick it the exact same way. So now that I've set it, you can see reference plane, or in the placement plane, you'll see reference point. Now I know that I'm working in that reference plane. So I'll mouse over, endpoint, that's going to be that point. I can tab through and actually get the specific point. That's the little symbol. It's like a circle with an X through it. That's the symbol for point. Or if I want to be sure that I'm selecting it, I can right click and go to snap overrides and point right there. Alright, and there's my circle. I'll just say 4 inches. It's my radius. Alright, so now I have a profile that's perpendicular to this path. So I can select the path, select the profile, or vice versa, doesn't matter, just have the two selected, and then go and create form. And since it sees a perpendicular profile and it sees a path, it's going to assume we want a sweep. So when we click create form, it creates a sweep. So you see how you don't really tell it it's a sweep, but just by the way that you model it, Revit understands what you're trying to accomplish, or it will try to assume as closely as possible what you're trying to do. All right, so now I'm going to show you a blend, just a blend extrusion. You can do this a couple different ways. I'll actually just show you the two different ways. So say essentially what a blend is you have two profiles, and then you want to create a form from those two profiles. One would be the beginning, and one would be the end, and it creates a form between the two. So we can create another just extrusion here. Let's say just a polygon with 6 sides. All right, so we created just a polygon on level 1. why don't we just in level 2, there's our polygon on level 1. We'll create another one on level 2 and make it slightly different. Alright, so we have one on level 1, one on level 2, and if we click both of these and click create form, it's going to create a blend between the two forms. So that's sort of a horizontal blend. We can do this in the other direction. That's probably a little bit more useful. So we'll create like a vertical profile here and then another one and create a form in between the two. And we're going to use some points to do that too, and some reference planes. So let's put 2 reference planes down. And we're going to create a profile on one of these reference planes, the profile on the other reference plane, and then blend the form between the two. So I'm going to just put 2 points so that I can start drawing in 3D. All right, so now we can see where our two lines are. There's our 2 points on that reference plane. All right, so I'm going to create a line, and I want to set my reference plane to be this first one. It says you can't really draw on that reference plane in a plan view, so it's asking you what view you want to be. I want to be in 3D, so that works. All right, so now I can just start drawing. And I'm drawing in 3D, which is always a little unusual, but I can be sure because I set it what reference plane I'm drawing in. All right, and now I want to draw another one on the next reference plane. So now I'm going to draw a profile that's just a little different. That works. Okay, so we got 2 profiles. So if we select these 2 profiles and hit create form, Revit will just kind of connect the two. So you notice we didn't really tell it we want this point to touch this point or this point to touch this point. They had the same number of sides and edges, but they were just slightly in different locations. So Revit essentially just guessed what we were trying to do and created the form. So now, what if this is not exactly what you wanted? Let's just make a copy of this thing, and then I'll kind of show you what I'm talking about. So I've selected this whole thing. How you could kind of drag over it like that. I just hit the tab and selected the whole form, and I'm just going to make a copy of it down here. All right, so I'm going to break this form apart and kind of show you what I'm talking about if this isn't exactly the form that I wanted it to make. Let's go ahead and select the whole thing, and then you'll notice that we have some different options when we've selected the whole thing. Divide surfaces, we'll get into that later. Basically, X-rays, adding profile, adding edge. You can continue to add to this thing. X-ray kind of breaks it down to where you can see everything. Or dissolve. Basically, dissolve will just reverse it back to the 2 profiles. So if you hit dissolve, it's going to essentially undo that form element and break it down to its original profiles. All right, so say the way that it did this end, we didn't really like it. We want to manually create each of those surfaces. We can do that through just creating lines and using a tool called 3D snapping. So if we go to lines, we can, what I essentially want to do is connect the points that I want it to connect to. But obviously it's trying to work in this work plane back over here that I originally set. I want it to snap in 3D. So there's this nifty little tool right here, 3D snapping. I checked that box. And now it's not really working in an associated reference plane. If I just start drawing out of, snapping to an object, it's going to draw in that reference plane. But as soon as I hover over something that can snap to, it's going to snap to it. That's the 3D snapping part. So let's say this base is, I want that to go to that base, and let's see how they did it. However it did it. Okay, let's say I want, that's more the form that I wanted it to do rather than what it did, which is actually pretty similar to what it did, but let's just, for argument's sake, let's say it didn't do it the way I wanted it to do it. Okay, let's say that's a little bit, you know, closer to what I wanted. So these are just lines, right? I didn't actually create any surfaces there. Those are just the outline of the surfaces that I want to create. But it's actually pretty easy to create surfaces. So once you have the 3 lines, if I just hit create form, there you go. It created a flat surface for me based off of those 3 lines. So, you know, Revit sometimes can do a couple different things. I'm going to create a line here to connect. There we go. So now we have 3 sides right here. So if we hit create form, it's really gonna think 2 different things. It can create a flat face based off of those 3 lines, or it can create an extrusion based off of those 3 lines. So when I hit create form, it basically wants to know, okay, which do you want me to do? Do you want me to create an extrusion or a flat face? Because it really had 2 options. When Revit does that, it'll give you the option to pick. So it created these 2 little boxes right here with a little preview of the 2 different options, create an extrusion or create a flat face. And then depending on which one you want to do, you just select it. There you go. So it created a surface. So I could go through here and create surfaces the way that I want it to do. So another example of that, we're just going to create a circle on level 1. Right now, if I create this form, it can either do like a sphere or it can do a cylinder, and it's going to ask me. Yeah, that's just another example of how it asks you what you want to create when it doesn't really know. All right, so we've done an extrusion, we've done a sweep, we've done a blend, both horizontal and vertical blend. So now let me show you how it can create, how Revit does surfaces. So let's say I want to do a, let's say I want to create a really unique line here. You could do that with like a spline. I don't know if that's a tool that we've really gone over up to this point. We're going to do it on level 1. We're just going to create a spline. A spline is basically you create multiple points, and it's going to gently curve a line through those points as best it can to match the, I guess, the curve that you're trying to create. So I just clicked a bunch of points through there, and there's my spline. So you can see each of these little control points right here, that's where I clicked my mouse. So you can see it actually doesn't go through where you clicked your mouse. It creates a curve as best it can approximate, you know, where you're trying to get it to go through the location of the points that you put. The beginning and the end are actually always, you know, where you clicked your mouse, but everywhere else it just sort of approximates to get that gentle curve. Now once we kind of have that curve, we can select that line, and if we hit form, you may be asking, okay, you know, what's Revit going to do? It, you know, it doesn't have another point in space to create a, you know, to create a form or a, you know, a solid or a void. You know, it's not a closed line, so there's no volume that creates. And what Revit does instead is it creates a surface. Right, so again, there's no volume to this, there's no solid geometry, it's just a face, it's just a surface. The great part about massing, which we'll go into later is that now that we have these masses, we can attach walls, we can break them up, attach panels, and we can add things to these surfaces. But you kind of have to have the raw form, which is what massing is for. You kind of have to have that raw form to start off with. So, that's why it would create a surface like this. So say, that's not quite the curve that we wanted. We wanted that line to actually go through our points. Well, let's just put some points on level 1. So we have some points here. We kind of move them around a little bit. All right, and we want a spline to actually go through those points. We can select those points in space, and then there's another tool, spline through points, and it will create our spline that runs through our points. The good part about using this rather than that actual spline tool is that we can grab these points and manipulate them. We can actually manipulate them in the z-axis as well. So let's say I wanted to push this guy down a little bit. So we start creating more of an unusual line there. So let's make just a copy of it, and this one I'm going to move around a little bit more. Okay, cool. So now, with this kind of breaking in the z-axis, it's not completely flat like the other line was. It's not completely flat on level 1. If I hit create form, it's going to attempt to create a surface that's perpendicular to that line. Well, now that it's got some z information on it, it's really difficult to pin down exactly, what is perpendicular to that line. In fact, if we create form right now, I'm not exactly sure what it's going to do. It may give us an error. Yeah, unable to create form element. So it gave us an error because it attempted to, create a surface perpendicular to where that line is. There is nothing perpendicular to that line. It's too kind of complex of a shape. Revit doesn't really know what to do. How you would kind of create these very unusual shapes is you may have two splines, what we have right here, and we select the two, and now we're going to create a form that's basically a blend, but it's a blended surface between those two lines. So I hit create form, and there we go. It's a blended surface between those two lines. So a very complex and unusual shape. So let's go ahead and dissolve that back down. Actually, no, let's not dissolve that back down. Let's create another one of these, but through multiple splines. Let's do like 4 splines. This is a great way to create sort of a nice smooth and complex surface. This is something that I like to do. I create a grid with reference planes. So let's see, I got a reference plane here. Yeah, that works. 3 horizontal, and I'll do create our vertical reference plane. And this is just a 10-foot grid. There we go. I extended it a little bit too far. That doesn't really matter. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put points at the intersection of those reference planes. Okay, so now we have 9 points in space. So how you want to do this is it's really up to you. We can really select all of these reference points. We can get some elevation to them. So Over here on properties, reference points, we have 9 of them. And then you see offset 0. Basically, it's sitting on, you can see our host right here is level 1, so the offset is, it's 0 off level 1, so it's sitting right on level 1. Say we want to bring this thing up just like 10 feet, all of them, all at once. So we put 10 feet. So now all these points are sitting up at 10 feet. But now we kind of want to move these around a little bit. So I'm just going to grab each one of them and just sort of move them in the Z direction. So I'm just basically sort of randomly doing this. Okay. So you can almost see sort of the mesh they're doing. Basically what I want to do now is just select 3 of them. It doesn't matter which 3. It's going to get you the same surface. We could select these 3 and create a spline through them. We could, do it the other way. Select these 3, do a spline through them. Select the middle 3 and do a spline. And the other end and do the spline. Okay. So we've essentially created 3 splines in space. We can still edit these. Kind of pull that down to create more of a dramatic effect here. There we go. Whatever we want to do. And then select these 3 lines, and we're going to create a form through it. So you'll see the form that it creates. So this can be as plain or as dramatic as you want it to be. Now that it's, in this view, we can't really see it in our level 1 anymore, so we may go to a site view to see it in plan. All right, there's our surface. It doesn't break outside the extents because I never moved anything in the XY axis. I can now select these edges and these points, move them around. If it's not quite the shape that I wanted it to, I can select it and go back to a dissolve and bring it back to its core, 3 lines. And then, I don't know, say I wanted to move this in the XY. I wanted to move this out a little bit. Same thing with this guy. Yeah, nothing too crazy. Select these points again and create my form. So you can see you can do really unique shapes with massing. You can get, and at any point you can still kind of massage it down to get exactly the right shape that you want it to be. So massing is an incredibly powerful tool, especially when you're designing. Once we kind of create these masses, that just the general form of the building that we want, we can then just finish the mass. And now use this geometry to attach walls to place floors inside of it. To break up that surface and put panels along it in the grid. There's a lot of things that you can do, and I'm going to cover all that in a different video. So that's going to be it for massing, and we'll look more into massing in coming videos. Thanks.